Hello and welcome to the Game Mess Game Club discussion for our game of the month in November, which was Guardians of the Galaxy, which only came out last year. So one of the newest games, probably the newest game we have done as part of our little club so far. I am Mike Minotti. I am the host of this here shindig. This is going to be a fun one. I think a lot of people showed up to play this one. I think this was on a lot of people's lists to get to, and also a lot of people who were championing this game and kind of mad that not enough people played it. We're sort of excited to get into this one this time. So I had a good time, that's for sure. And I see a bunch of people here contributing in our chat and in the Discord, and we'll call on them. We've got some sort of written in statements we're going to read here for people who couldn't make it to the live bit here. But yeah, I missed this game. I missed this game. Kind of shame on me. I think like a lot of people when they first showed it, I was whelmed. I was like, all right, we're doing this again. And then once it came out and everybody was like, oh, this is good actually. I was kind of in I don't have time for this. I was not counting on this game actually being worth playing. I'm just going to close my eyes, cover my ears, and ignore you all. But finally, I wanted to get to it at some point, and making it a Game S Game Club games was a pretty good way to sort of force me to finally get into it. And it turns out pretty much everybody was right. This is a good game. It's worth playing. So I guess I'm kind of curious if anyone else hadn't played it yet and why they held off on it. I wonder if people sort of had a similar reaction to me where they assumed it wouldn't be good, and then once it was, they just were like, no, I don't have time for that. This wasn't part of my calculations, because that is 1,000,000% where I was. My brothers were furious at me. I think AJ gave me his copy, like his physical copy. Like, what year is it? And I still never played it. But Shawn, how about you?
So I'm basically in the same position you were going into this, where I was sort of just underwhelmed by the majority of what I saw. Like nothing looked bad. I was just like, man, maybe later. It's not really clicking with me right now. It's not really what I'm looking for. But yeah, I'll get into my thoughts on how I felt about the game a little bit later on. But as it turns out, I was pretty justified there because I was not blown away by this. I think that what I saw out of the game in previews ended up being basically meeting my expectations there.
Oh, this is interesting, Shawn, because most people I think come away like really impressed, and you sound like you're down on it. This is going to be
Well,
fun.
Mike, I think it's going to be interesting when you talk to some of the rest of us because I'm definitely not alone in spoiler.
Really interesting, because all I was hearing when I was streaming it was everyone coming in and be like, "Yeah, this game's wow, this game is good." I was like, "Yeah, everyone's right." Okay, interesting. I wasn't expecting a negative contingent as a part of this discussion. That's exciting. Jedi, how about you? What are you thinking?
Uh, I really, really like the game. It is basically what if, we just did the Guardians movies in game form. And that's pretty much what we got. Like, this is pretty much on par with those two MCU movies. The writing is just about as strong, and I think that's pretty much going to be like number one with the blood. One of the top reasons why people like this game so much is just the writing is just excellent in general. Um, but yeah, I think this is the game that I think people wanted out of the Avengers. And of course, I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit more, but Avengers ended up being a disappointment for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the Avengers is like so oddly tied to this game, even though they are completely different. Randy, what did you want to say?
I love this game, and I hesitate. I struggle to think of a story or writing that is not necessarily my favorite, but better. Like I think I can't think of a story that's better written than this off the top of my head. I'm sure it exists, but I struggle to think of it. And I personally think that the writing and the story are better than the movies. I'm not that big of a fan of the movies personally.
I like the first movie a lot. I thought the second movie was fine to watch once. But I do like the first Guardians movie. But I think like a lot of people I had that kind of Silicon Valley, like, oh, this is kind of like the movie, but not really. It's sort of weird, right? And then playing it, I got over it pretty immediately. There are definitely a lot of similarities there. the game does a good job doing its own thing. And there are some characterizations here that I like just as much, or maybe even better. Drax is, and I love Batista Drax. He's the highlight of the movies, but the game Drax here is very good. I think he actually does a good job. He's very funny. I think he hits emotional notes very well. Also, like so much of my playthrough was me trying to make Drax happy because I thought, like, man, Drax is my best friend. I like this character a lot. Then there are some characters like the game Mantis in the game. I think is way better than the Mantis we get in the movies. I feel the same about Gamora as well here. So yeah, just a really likable cast. And again, the writing super short. I think the hardest thing to do with video game writing is to be funny. I think that is more difficult than even being emotional. Being funny is just this really hard skill, and it's even harder to translate that into video games a lot of the time, especially if you're doing it from writing and not just trying to make, Goat Simulator where everything is silly. So the fact that this game was actually laugh out loud funny several times was really impressive. Jedi, do you have something else you wanted to add there?
Um, Sorry, no, I was actually eating, so
No,
my apologies.
no, you're okay. I thought I might have just caught you forgetting to mute again. Randy, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the movies. I don't want to do that. And this game obviously takes a lot of cues from the movies, and I think this game would not exist without those movies. A lot of the writing and the tone and all of that stuff very similar. It takes a lot of inspiration from it, but I just think it improves upon it in just every conceivable way. I think you mentioned emotion. I think that is something that for me personally, the movie doesn't really have. It's got a lot of heart maybe, but not necessarily emotion. It's got, it's funny and fun, but I don't know if like the message really rings true in the movies for me like it does in this game. And I think the characterizations are a big part of that. You mentioned Drax. I think in the movie he's fun and he's funny, but he's kind of a dope. Like he's a little,
Yes.
He's kind of a big doofus. And here and in this one, he kind of seems more like of a somber father figure that is kind of wise in a weird way, but also too literal. I think it just comes across better for me personally.
No, I think that's pretty correct. Although I'm gonna say you didn't get emotional at "We Are Groot," you monster, but I'll allow it.
A little bit. Like it's not completely devoid, but I think this game has quite a bit more going for it in that regard.
No, I think that's right. Let's talk about that Avengers factor here, because I actually was better on Avengers, and I think some people. I thought the campaign was fun. I had some fun with the multiplayer. I think the idea of trying to make it this really big live service thing was a bizarre and weird choice because there just was not enough content to do that kind of thing. And then there's just this problem here where you have Square Enix with like the one studio that is the most like Crystal Dynamics in IDA's. Now they're gonna make another Marvel game, and when you just look at it, it's like, wow, that sure does look like the Avengers. Oh, Guardians of the Galaxy, it's gonna be the same thing. We're gonna play as these guys, right? I think they just always had a hard time communicating that it wasn't going to be like that. And it felt like this game just really paid for the sins of the Avengers a lot, where a lot of people, and not even that many people, picked up the Avengers and weren't really that into it. So when they saw Guardians of the Galaxy, it almost felt like a pseudo sequel, even though it's not the same studio and it wasn't even the same kind of game. So I guess I'm curious if anybody else had strong feelings about the Avengers and if that colored what they were expecting or what they thought about Guardians of the Galaxy going into it. Randy, how about you?
The Avengers, I didn't give too much of a shot. Like it had not a lot of people cared for it, so I kind of stayed away from it. I tried it a little bit, didn't really click. I think a big part for me, which I held off on Guardians initially because the first time they showed it, it looked bad. It looked real bad. Like the gameplay seemed really floaty. It was kind of a vertical slice with the cringiest dialogue, at least what appeared to be really cringy dialogue without any of the context. I'm like, okay, Joss Whedon just blew his load all over this and did like I don't know if I can take this. So it just seemed to me like they were trying way too hard to be the movie turned to 11 or whatever, and it just really turned me off. And it wasn't until the good word of mouth from like people like Jeff and other podcasts that I listened to saying like, no, this is actually really good. And I had there was a GameStop sale that had it for $20 on PS5. I'm like, sure, why not? And then I played through it last year, and I'm like, this is incredible. This is like my favorite game this year, and I liked it so much I played it again for this, just because I liked it that much.
All right, Shawn, I want to hear it. What don't you like about the game? Because I think I have an idea, but what's the problem here?
Everything.
Everything. You don't even like the writing.
I thought the writing was borderline terrible most of the time.
Wow.
Because so much like this, I actually didn't finish the game. I got a little over halfway. So if it picks up towards the end, that's on me.
It's the same game.
Okay.
You've experienced the game. It's not gonna flip you around if you feel that strongly about it.
Yeah, I really wanted to give it a shot, and I think I don't think the game as a whole is bad. I think it's a good example to me of being better than the sum of its parts. But the problem is, I think most of those parts, to me at least, were really bad. Because like with the dialogue, it kept pushing me away because I actually, it triggered something in me where I kept keeping track of how many times the dialogue was, oh no, are we going to do this thing? And Star-Lord would just be like, yes, that is the thing that we are going to do. And
no.
Every time it came up, it just kept pushing me further and further away because it just felt, I don't know, almost like a caricature of the movie. It's the same problem that I did have with the Avengers, where it's trying too hard to be MCU. And Guardians has the advantage of being, like, Guardians in the MCU is so different from the rest of it that it always did feel fresh. But here, it feels like it's trying to follow in those same footsteps, and I just really did not like a lot of it. But here's the thing. I'm hot and cold on it, because I said it's borderline terrible a lot of the time. But there are those moments that did make me crack up. There is like moments of fantastic writing, and I think the subtler it was, the better it was. For example, not even a writing thing, but a visual gag. Drax sitting there with reading glasses on and sarcasm for dummies is just like one of the funniest things I've ever seen before. I was like, that is very clever. That is very smart humor right there. I really like it. But anytime, I felt like the writing went one step too far. Like it was trying to provide a punchline that it didn't need. Like the punchline would be delivered, and then the character would say something else like, "Hey, audience, did you get that we were making a joke here?" Example is when they're walking up to Lady Hellbender's fortress, or when they're inside of it, and Peter's like, all for one, one for all, and Gamora's like, "Oh, that's good. Did you come up with that on your own?" And he's like, yes, I did. I came up with that on my own, right off the top of my head." I'm like, the better way to deliver that line would have been, yep, sure did, and just like be very subtle about it. And so that's the problem I kept having with the writing, is it going a little bit too far and sort of like beating you over the head.
All right, I want to. Shawn says that there's a contingent, that he's not alone here. Someone, who else? All right, who else among you doesn't ultimately?
There it is. Get in your beef hammer.
Oh, it's beef. All right, beef. Let's hear it. Are you echoing these things?
Hey, I'm okay. You know me, Mike. I hate to lose Shawn. Okay, like we don't want Shawn to be right. But well, first off, two major problems I have with this game. One, I bought it right before it went to Game Pass, and two, I was promised. What song was it? Oh, Kickstart My Heart was gonna play, and it never came on for me. So I have two major problems.
Who cares? It has Iron Maiden all over the place. That's all that really matters.
Mike, I'm 25. I don't know what Iron Maiden is. I hate
Jesus
to tell
Christ.
you this.
Look, they're still around, man. Look, it's not like they were mostly big in the '80s. It's not like I was around there in their prime either. You got to get on Iron Maiden. But okay, fair enough. So yeah, those two issues. But
okay, I'm not. Well, I know for Sean's like he's like I'm on cold. I'm like I kind of lost most of my steam because I did finish it, and it's a bit too long because I did lose steam as I kept going. But I think my problem is I don't even know exactly how to phrase it. I don't know. It just didn't find anything like it. I actually didn't find anything like to stick out too much. Not the gameplay, not the writing of the story. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Guardian, so I've never read the comics. Just seen 2 of the movies, so I only know them from that.
I think that's most people. I don't think there's many
Mm.
big Guardians of the Galaxy comic fans out there. Now, don't come at me. I know you are out there, but for the vast
Yeah.
majority of people,
I'm sure there's people in this Discord who've seen them. I mean, so I don't even really have that to compare to. And I thought this, I don't know, you guys say it's a little different. I didn't find it too different from the movies. I thought it was pretty similar. Maybe someone out can like tell me what's kind of different, but I didn't find too much different. So
yeah, I'm
really,
actually,
you know,
sorry to cut you off. I'm just very curious, real quick, if anyone does have that context of, because to me, it felt like they were just mimicking the movies, but I'm wondering if the movies just did a very good job of taking after the comics, and maybe it's just like, oh, these were both very good at mirroring the source material. If that's the case, then maybe we're missing something here. But yeah, sorry, Beef, go on.
yeah, and I mean the writing, like it didn't put me off. The only, I mean, I thought it was like kind of fine. I kind of the more went on, kind of like just thought it was kind of the same thing. So I think someone chat said like you either like it or you don't. And I was like kind of in the middle. I didn't hate it. I think it was just mostly like if I had to rate this game, I was like at 6 on like everything. It just the longer it went on, I kind of thing was sticking out. I don't know why, especially the gameplay, which I think is kind of the big criticism for most people is the gameplay is nothing too special. It's not very difficult. It kind of is always the same the whole way through. So,
yeah, I think
I don't.
that criticism I can see, like the writing, I'm pretty much on board with. I thought that it did a very good job of. I mean, it's like the movies in that it's it's kind of quippy and it's jokey, but I just think it did a good job of that. And I think it did it with. Personally, I didn't think it like borderline on Whedonism, which I don't even know how you describe that, but that's where you get this kind of like very too clever quippy, I suppose you would call it. It didn't reach that for me, but that's what people usually say is oh yeah, I like the writing a lot, but the gameplay is only okay. I definitely agree. It's probably too easy on normal. Like it's almost never particularly challenging. And it's not all that complex either. You're basically using cooldowns. You're basically kind of dodging attacks as best you can while waiting for your cooldowns and using them. And yet it worked for me okay. I had enough fun with it, and there was the progression of getting the better cooldowns. Some of them were great, like Rocket Raccoon's like giant all the guns thing. That is one of the best like attacks I've seen in a video game. I loved that specifically. So that was a lot of fun. Villain, what do you think? I don't know if you want to comment on the combat here or something else. Don't hear you, Villain. I'm afraid.
All right. Well, while we're waiting on that, just because you did ask me like what I thought, I said there was the flip side of it is, I didn't think the gameplay was good either, and I think this is a much less controversial take. But I felt like the entire time I was literally just holding right trigger and then pressing the abilities when they came off cooldown. And I don't know if that
that is kind
better.
of it.
Okay. I didn't know if that got better with like boss fights that maybe made you be more strategic towards the end of the game or not. It sounds like that might not be the case.
Really?
Okay. Then yeah,
Like,
I got a little bored kind of just holding down the trigger and moving and then using the abilities. It almost felt weirdly like, I don't know, Geometry Wars or something, where you're kind of just always doing the things and you're just positioning yourself on the battlefield, which I didn't find particularly engaging. I think it would have been better if there was a more tactical element. My thought when I was playing the game was I was like, man, I wish this was in one of 2 different genres. I wish this was a tactics game and you are Peter giving everyone else commands and then like positioning yourself. Almost like a Mario plus Rabbids, I thought would have been a great style for like what they were almost going for in real time. Or, ironically, I was like, damn, this would make a good Telltale game because I felt like the best
Have you
parts...
played the Telltale game that they made in Guardians?
I know, but I felt like the actual best parts of where the writing shone through for me is the moments where you are Peter, like making decisions, and then that does affect the dialogue and the way like your teammates interact with you. I was like, okay, this has potential here because there are some really cute moments depending on the voice lines that you pick with Peter, and so I thought they I just feel like this style of game, the gameplay itself, the combat did the game a disservice, and I felt it might have been better in a different
I'm,
genre or something.
I'm gonna call on Soisuke in a second here, but I guess my one counter to that is that it is basically actually still kind of a Telltale game. Like the combat sequences, they aren't very long, and they also aren't very difficult. They almost are kind of filler. Maybe is more negative than I mean, but it is kind of what they are. They are sort of just the things you go between them. Soisuke's muted himself back again. So I don't know if he did want to talk or not. But Soisuke, is there something you wanted to add?
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, I kind of agree about the whole combat and everything. It does get very repetitive, in the sense that like it feels like even when like you do level up those skills, you're not really doing anything different. I don't know.
Yeah, there is a progression, like a crafting system thing too, and that might be a point of criticism too, is that you don't necessarily feel a big power swing from those things. A lot of them are very minor, like do like so and so more damage when you're at less than 25% health. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
no, exactly. So it was just like, but like I love the story. I mean, the story's fantastic.
yeah,
It's definitely a more comic based story than it is to like how they kind of just like make it up kind of and take plot points in the MCU. I guess is really how they do it. And sometimes they pick and choose. Where this one really felt more like what it would have been if they followed the comics more.
hmm
And I don't think that was a bad thing. I mean, I think it was a good thing to just try to, not associate itself too much with the MCU in that sense. So it was probably better for them to do that. But yeah, no, that's pretty much it. I loved it. Besides, the combat just feeling kind of repetitive on end,
yeah.
but
I don't think
that's
anybody
it.
like really was going to hold too much of a what's the phrase? I'm not going to hold a pot for something. I'm not going to hold water. I don't think too many people are going to hold water for the combat in this, or feel a strong need to defend it. It does get a little bit more interesting later on when you get some of those elemental things where it's like, okay, the wind one I used to sort of pull in snipers, right? And the lightning is good when there's groups of enemies. There's something there, but yeah, not a compared to even something like God of War Ragnarok with its combat system. No, nowhere near that level of complexity. Randy, what did you want to add there?
Yeah, the gameplay never really got in the way for me. It never really entered the next level of super duper fun for me either. But I had moments where, yeah, like I was actually going to mention the polling thing, pulling the snipers down. I actually liked quite a bit, and switching between the different elemental things to exploit weaknesses. And I liked using the rocket's vortex grenade, and then using the AOE attacks from Drax or something like that. There were moments there that felt tactical and fun, but it definitely did get repetitive, and especially near the end, I played on hard, and man, a lot of those guys just take a lot to go down, and since it's not hard, you're just continuing to shoot
Right.
them over and over again. But then there's the exploration sequences, which are pretty generic video game action adventure. You move this block, shoot this thing, move this platform. But I got to bring it back to the story because it all felt in service of the story to me. Like there was character development in those moments. Like you got Rocket with the water stuff, and you actually had
Mm.
to move the water out of the way. And that paid off really, really well, Shawn. I don't know if you got there, but that was a really great moment. And it's disappointing. I thought we were all going to come over here and like share notes about our favorite beat that got our favorite story beat, because I just have so many. I loved every moment that just kept coming to me, and the message I thought was really strong. At the end, and this is maybe me as a family man, but the way you had to kind of talk Nikki down was freaking perfection. It was the best, one of my favorite story moments in any game ever. I can't think. It was so good. And I thought we were all going to come in here and gush, and now we're sitting here talking about the gameplay. Who cares about the gameplay?
I
Darn it!
know. Well, I know we've taken a. Who cares about the gameplay? I know this whole thing has taken a slightly more negative slant than I was expecting. So I want to read a comment here from Bench JC, who couldn't actually be here, who said, "Hey, I wasn't able to make it live, so here are my thoughts. I absolutely loved the game. I beat it in 2 days. The combat is okay, but actually found it pretty fun towards the end. The story is great and goes pretty deep, and the characters are all very well written, and the party banter is great. I hate that they end on an open cliffhanger with a new team edition because we will likely never get a sequel, and that's a real crime. Also had many visual bugs and 2 to 3 hard crashes. Those are my thoughts. I've heard a few people. I don't know if I'd call it a straight up cliffhanger at the end, unless I'm forgetting it exactly.
No,
But
I actively disagree with that.
yeah, I'm okay not getting a sequel. I was getting that comment a lot from people in my chat. Oh, I'm mad there's not gonna be a sequel. Fine. We have this one great game. It's good. Who knows if the sequel can live up to it? I'm pretty happy there. Jedi, you've been off mute for a second there. What did you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, I know as people's thoughts about the combat, yeah, the combat is fine, but there are moments during the gameplay, especially when you do have to pick, the Guardians, where the story elements do come in, and it's really nice. Especially when, for example, you want Rocket to go into the hole, and he just says no. It's like, well, why don't you want to? And then of course it goes into the whole, the branching choices option. Which, by the way, what do we think of the branching choices options? I thought I was pretty okay with them. I mean, the big thing about those is they don't really affect the choice all that much. It just kind of adds a little extra flavor as you're progressing through the story. I don't know. What does everyone else think
It
about
is
that?
kind of like that Mass Effect problem, right? Where like you start here and there's all these branches and it seems really
Mhm.
interesting, but you discover actually these branches are all coalescing like back on themselves
Right.
at the end. There is one ending. It is neat though how some things can change a lot. I think the whole thing with Lady Hellbender is a big example where that can really shake out differently depending on how the negotiations go, if you use Groot or if you use Rocket. So, I was just even talking to my brother. It was interesting hearing how that was different from him. I know like somehow I messed something up with Cosmo, so I had to like do more to sort of like get away from him at a certain point, and I thought that was interesting. I know I missed like a story beat with getting Gamora a doll apparently. So like I like some of that stuff. I think it's interesting that things can be different there. A villain, were you able to get your mic working there?
I believe so.
Yes,
Can
you
you hear me?
did.
Okay, great. The dialogue choice thing, I think Jeff talks about this a lot sometimes with games, but just the illusion of choice is often the good thing, even if it doesn't have any actual consequence, but feeling like you're having an impact on the story helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. Octo, I don't think you've spoken yet. What did you want to say?
Yo, am I coming in okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you are.
I generally enjoyed the game overall, and with everything everyone said, the story, the characters, but I think where felt it fell a bit short was in how mechanical the choices felt. It felt very much like a door A, door B type of thing. And, 2012 Telltale Games, it was a different time, but 10 years later, I felt they could have done a better job, especially with how good the production values were and the acting was, to hide their choices a bit better or to not make them so gamey. It very much felt I could see the flowchart with my eyes as the game was playing out.
I could see that. Shawn, what did you want to add here?
Well, I thought this was a tangent, but I actually guess it plays into what we're talking about now with the choices and their impact. I actually so as much as I disliked the writing personally, I thought the story itself that they were telling, I would agree that that was very good. Um, like the moments themselves and the choices that they make presenting them, the order and the way things build up. I thought that was all very well done. When I say that I didn't like the writing, it's very specifically the dialogue that I didn't like. But I thought like there were some really interesting moments. Like I didn't expect them to do certain things. Like the opening is a little, get to know the characters or whatever. But when you do start to get into stuff like with Nikki and everything, and like getting the ship like impounded for a second in the beginning there, I thought all of that was like very good and it built up to an interesting place. And it's I didn't realize that there were any sort of like branching. I assumed that that all came back to the same place, and I guess if that is the case, then maybe maybe that's why I didn't notice that you could sort of like splinter off in any one direction.
Um. Let's see, Randy. What did you want to add there?
Real quick, I think Shoji Kodo had his mic unmuted. I've been talking a lot, so if he's got something to say, he can.
Mm-hmm. I didn't see that one go off. There you are, Shoji. Anything you want to add?
No, basically everybody else had kind of covered it, which is why I remuted myself. But yeah, like I wish the branching dialogue and story options would have been a little bit more meaningful. But as everyone's saying, it kind of coalesces and you're back to the same place in anyway. So it's just some slight variances in dialogue options and such, really, regardless of what you chose. Trying to think of some of the options, like a few people that I had talked to, or even like buddies of mine that had played it previously before me. I was just going through and asking like some choices that they had, and I think one person mentioned like you couldn't save Cosmo. Or they didn't save Cosmo at the end, and I was just like, "Oh, what happens?" And I was like, "I saved him. Like, what happened?" And they're like, "Oh, he just do this little thing, and he basically just goes away." But the same thing happens story wise. So I wish there would have been more importance on those choices that you made, but yeah, nothing really too relevant to add to the whole conversation overall, because everyone kind of covered that pretty well.
Can I chime in with something?
Go ahead,
Go for it.
So I would just like to point out that this is the Deus Ex Human Revolution and Mankind Divided team, and I think it's worth pointing out what a spectacular leap in character writing and characterization it is from those games. I like those games a fair bit, more than they probably deserve, but they were so lacking in character. I didn't care about a single person in any of those games except maybe Adam Jensen, so really, really impressive step up from Eidos Montreal, I think, on their character work, which was really lacking in the previous games and is probably the strongest part of this game.
Randy, as you take a turn here, I think also we should do what you suggested earlier. Maybe each talk about our favorite story beat. So say what you wanted to say, but also I want to know what your favorite story beat was. I know you kind of mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so okay, there's quite man, I could go on forever, but I do want to mention. So that is depressing to hear about Deus Ex, because I was actually, after playing this again, I'm like, man, I want more of that. And if you're telling me that's not what it is, that's very depressing. Oh well. Either way, so I wanted to talk about the branching a little bit, because I think that's service to the story. I think someone had mentioned that there are times where Rocket just straight up won't do stuff when you ask him to do it, and certain characters will do stuff before you ask them to do it, and some of that is tied into how they react to you. So I played it differently this time than I did the first time. So Rocket got really mad at me this time. Last time he and I were buds.
Oh.
The first time I played it, and so like he hated my guts the whole time until probably after Nowhere. And it did shape out a little different. He was he was just nasty to me the whole time. So I kind of like that, where it's these characters are treating you a little bit differently. You get to see different layers of their personality, and on top of it, and so the game teaches you that you should always be talking. If there's one criticism I have about the writing, it is that there's too much of it, to the point where I just kept cutting off people talking nonstop every time there's some kind of interesting piece of dialogue coming in. That's one thing I will say I didn't much care for. But they give you the option to chime into the conversations quite a bit, and you're just kind of trained to do it. And then later on, there is a scene where they're talking about different enemies they have fought, and as they are saying it, the enemies keep popping up. And they're like, oh, we fought these guys on Seknarf, and then they show up, and then it's like, oh, good thing we're not here. Good thing those Nova Corps guys aren't showing up, and then they show up. And then if you're paying attention, you can kind of understand that, oh, wait, they're showing up as I am talking. You are then get an option to talk about another monster, and if you choose none, you just skip that fight entirely and get rewarded experience points for it. Because I was paying attention, like, if I say a monster here, I bet you that's going to show up, so I'm not going to say anything. And then they figured it out, like, oh, yeah, you're right. If you say something out loud, then you have to fight it. And I thought that was a really cool gameplay thing. Like, they taught me, they kind of had me pay attention. I don't have to keep talking in a way. But that was it. And you had mentioned that the Seknarf 9 thing, choosing Rocket over Groot, can change. It is an entirely different level if you choose Rocket. I chose Rocket this time, and it was much more just like everyone shooting at you at all times. Where if you choose Groot, it's kind of more of a little bit stealthier, kind of like it's way different. You actually end up with more credits if you choose Rocket because you end up stealing from her, which I thought was kind of funny. So favorite story beats. That thing with Nikki at the end when you're talking her down, I can't think of, they could not have done that any better as far as I'm concerned. But I also like, and everything pays off. The part where you have the option to throw Rocket in the beginning, and I don't know how that played out for people, but I chose not to have him thrown. But then at the end, Rocket just volunteers, like, no, throw me. We got this. Like, we have grown together as a team. Just throw me. I trust you. Like, that was a really great payoff for me. The fridge. The fridge that you keep having to close. Like, why do you keep closing the fridge? Oh, it's the one constant in all the universe. Like, everything. I could go on forever.
I do love too when he volunteers to be thrown. That's when Drex is like, "No, we don't throw. You're a valued team member, not some tool to be thrown." I'm like, "Yes, this is." I mean, so much of just in general, Drex, like at the beginning, has like these kind of nasty names for everybody, and then he just starts calling them all by their names, and there's this, all this bonding, and it's great. I think my favorite moment, you kind of have that. You can have that optional dialogue with Drax. Again, I love Drax in this game. On Nowhere, where you just kind of talk about your dead family members and what the afterlife. It's just this really sweet, but not heartwarming moment. It's actually kind of a thing of like tension and conflict, and it has a good payoff later. Just a really well done scene that I really enjoyed. Villain Mac, what did you want to say?
As far as like favorite story beats goes, I don't know how you can't bring up when you're inside of Drax's head and you have to pull him out of his whole dream state of like being with his wife and kid, and then that emotional moment, because that one hit pretty hard.
Yes. Oh yeah, that one. There was a lot of good moments, sort of like that. It's like Peter kind of had his own things too with his mom, and then with kind of Nikki and the whole sort of dream family thing. Yeah, and all that stuff. That stuff just works very well. There, in kind of, Randy, I think you talked about how like some characters will like do things on their own. The first time Groot just made the bridge himself, and I didn't have to tell him to, and I was like, yeah, good initiative. Like, man, that does kind of rule. That actually is like a neat way of turning a mechanic into this story beat somehow, and to make it feel like the team is actually coming together, right?
Yeah, and the other way too. And the scene where the Rocket had to save everybody by going through the water, and he just wasn't doing it. I'm just mashing on the button. I'm like, get the heck in there! What are you doing? And he just wasn't doing it. And finally, it's just like Flark it, which I could do without Flark. I don't need to hear that.
There was a lot of Flark. Flark was getting a little on my nerves, especially it started off getting on my nerves. Then after like 10 hours, I was finally like, all right, I'm a little over it. I still don't like all the flarking, Flark.
It was a lot. But either way, it was still a great moment where you kept trying him to get in there, and countless times you had him crawl into these holes, and this time he's just like, no, I told you I just cannot do it. You guys are all gonna have to die because and there's a good emotional reason why he doesn't want to go in the water. It makes perfect sense, and you feel bad for him, but at the end of the day, he just like, all right, I don't want my friends to die. I gotta suffer through this. And then to pay off, like he gets his ultimate ability. I bet he overcame his fear and he got his thing. So I really love that. We haven't even talked about Cosmo at all as a character, and Cosmo's awesome. It's so funny.
Yeah, Cosmo. Oh yeah, Cosmo was very well done. Is he even in the movies yet? I thought he wasn't, but then they had a picture of him on one of the Disney Skyliners with Yondu, and I was like,
he was like 4 seconds at the end of the first movie. He shows up. He doesn't say anything, and the only reason I know that is because after having played this game again, I'm like, I need to keep going and watch the movie again. And I'm just like,
Cosmo shows up in the holiday special, although I think Cosmo is a female now in this one.
What?
I have to watch that holiday special. I've heard good things about it. Oh, by the way, Mr. EM, thank you for following.
I love the way they built Cosmo in the video game, but they just kind of drop her in this holiday special. So it's like as great as it is in this, I feel like they're dropping the ball as in the MCU.
The ball, not fun ball you play catch with. Jedi Voss, what did you want to throw in there?
Yeah, I think in terms of like the story beats, the thing they do really, really well is how they they hit a lot of jokes, but then they do come back around and they pay off even later. It's like they hit, for example, like the Fu Manchu joke. How they keep teasing that from the very start of the game, and of course you finally do get to go fight him late in the game, and of course it culminates in that very awesome shot that they have of Fu Manchu, and then you have Peter Quill. It's like the big, sort of like a big movie moment, and it's awesome. Um, in terms of my favorite little moment, it probably is. I think it's when you entirely skipped in your playthrough. I think it was the split lip moment when you're on nowhere. There's a whole sequence where if you go to like the bar,
Yeah, I missed that.
you run into this guy who Peter Quill apparently does not know whatsoever. He's this guy named Split Lip. He looks like an alien. And he forces him to basically sing a song with him about how they're riding out in town together. And then when you finally go through like that whole sequence where he's trying not to get shot, the game finally rewards you by saying Peter Quill successfully salvaged the relationship that he cannot remember. So it was actually a very cool, a very cool joke, just completely off to the side, where obviously you could skip it and you would not know about it at all. But it was a very clever moment, and the game is just full of little jokes like that all over the place.
I want to read a couple more of these sort of thoughts that were written in by people who couldn't attend. Dr. Suss here says his 2 cents on Guardians of the Galaxy, which he played on a Series S. Said story is probably the best part of the experience, well enough crafted with good voice acting, even though I thought there was way too much talking. It's entirely too linear for my tastes. Overall, pretty forgettable though. Gameplay, by far the weakest part of the game. The puzzles were incredibly easy. The combat mixed boring with satisfying, with regular combat being boring, but the specials being pretty satisfying. Just felt like I was going down a narrow corridor the entire time, doing whatever I was supposed to do at the exact time that I had to do it. No exploration, no freedom, no replay value. Visuals, it's pretty beautiful. The colors are very vibrant. I like the designs of the characters, especially Gamora. Not that there's too much going on during some fights, but overall, pretty game. Pet peeves, the meeting during the fight to hype everyone up were cringe as hell. The characters talk all the time during battle. It's super annoying. Some banter is good, but too much is a pain in the ass. Final verdict, it's not a game for me. I went up to chapter 13 or 14 out of 17 and didn't care enough about the story or the gameplay to finish and just put it down. The story, the strongest part, was so memorable that I have entirely forgotten it. Wow, another pretty negative take here. I think those are all fair criticism, at least, except the linear thing. I'm always somebody who's completely fine with a linear game, really, if it's sort of well crafted and there's a point to linearity, and I think that there is here. Like, I don't necessarily need a lot of exploration, and there is still there are moments where if you kind of go off a beaten path a little bit, or if you solve an extra puzzle, you will get things like extra credits or crafting materials or those extra costumes.
Yeah, and you get yelled at for doing that.
Yeah, well, that's like the thing.
That's kind of annoying.
Yeah, God of War is big into that too now, where it's like you go to find your secret thing, and the characters are like, "What is she doing?" The other character's like, "He likes to do that sometimes." I'm like, "Game, I get what you think you're trying to do here, but just shut up. I'll be right
Peter,
back."
just say out loud you're looking for collectibles.
Yeah,
that's
I'll
what
be
you
right
do.
back.
Just say it out loud once.
Yeah. Sean, what did you want to add in there? Or just happy that somebody else agrees with you that the game is trash?
Another person. There's threes of us.
There's threes of us.
Well, I do think the one time I agree that it got a little annoying. That's like, hey, I'm doing a video game thing. Can you please not shame me for being like doing video game things? I get what they're trying to do. They're like, everyone's calling Peter a loser because like, oh, he's picking up trash out the ground. Okay, sure, it got a little old after a while. I thought the one time that worked very well was in the beginning when Nikki, where she's like, are you trying to run away again? You're trying to like escape this place. And he's like,
it's
no,
cute sometimes.
No. Yeah, like it was cute, especially because it's not the first time. It's the second time that you do that because it's level 2, chapter 2. So at that point, it was still cute. But also just to knock out a favorite story beat, that section with Peter and Nikki and her mom and everything, that was like, of what I played at least, my favorite story beat. Not necessarily a story beat per se because it was sporadic, but having the flashbacks to Peter as a kid, I actually thought was like good world building, because I do kind of like it when a game sort of just puts you in a scenario and says, You know what? Kind of just walk around. Like, here's the objective, but if you want to like pick up this picture or something, go ahead. We'll give
Man,
you a
you
little bit of
really do
dialogue.
just want it to be a Telltale game.
I think it would worked well for the type of dialogue that they were doing. But then, like the last thing to what was just mentioned, I do agree on the huddles. I did not use them after the first time that you were required to because I just thought they were so cheesy.
You guys are just wrong. The huddles are good. The huddles are fun.
Mike, I'm sorry, but when Star Lord leaps into the air and there's a JPEG of God rays around him, and everyone comes in and like is like, Peter, what are we gonna do? They're kicking our ass, and I'm like, just keep doing what you're doing because that won't change anything about the gameplay, y'all.
Well, somebody's never gonna be a Pee-wee baseball coach, that's for sure.
Apparently not.
No. Villain, was there something you wanted to throw in there?
Yeah, that written comment mentioned something we haven't really talked about, which is the visuals.
Yes,
I think the
I wanted to
game
touch
is
on that.
beautiful, and I love the way it uses. It's probably just from the comics, but just like all the sci-fi concepts they use in this game. I think it's really really cool, like the faith energy stuff and the way the lighting reflects off on all these walls, and I just couldn't get enough of it. Like not since Mass Effect have I really felt like I had a sci-fi world that was like really cool to see visually.
First off, Vanderlyle, thank you for the follow. Second off, I was especially a big fan of just the color choices. Like the planets did a really good job of looking like alien planets. I thought a lot of those design elements were really cool. Randy, what did you want to add there?
Oh man, it's just too much. The dialogue, the huddles, I kind of want to talk about. The dialogue choices kind of is a gameplay thing, and it's true of the huddles as well. You have to kind of pay attention a little bit, so you get a bigger bonus if you choose the right one. That's kind of throughout where someone had mentioned split lip, and you can lose that minigame. You can choose the wrong dialogue. You get certain bonuses if you choose the right dialogue. Like certain areas will open up if you talk your way out of certain situations. If you talk to what's the head priest guy's name? Riker, I believe his name.
Yeah,
Not
Riker.
Riker. That is it. Riker, really?
I think it's Riker. Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. You can distract him long enough for Rocket to hack a robot.
Yeah,
and if you succeed, that there's a good payoff for that. And it's actually really funny too. So that's a gameplay thing, and I think that's just good stuff. I think that's good writing. I think the visuals are great. I agree. We haven't even talked about the soundtrack. The soundtrack.
It's cool.
I know you said Maiden, and of course there's that moment where when Eagles Dares playing when you're flying around. It's like, yes, just give it to me, please.
Yeah, I do have to say, even the Avengers game also had a Maiden song featured. So I'm just a big fan of this Iron Maiden Marvel synergy. Actually, now that I think about it, Iron Maiden literally released licensed Marvel shirts, so they're in bed with each other, which is funny, but I support it completely. Jedi Moss, what did you want to add?
The music is, of course, really, really good. That's obviously a big staple now of the Guardians, both the films and the movies. They have really strong soundtracks. The music is a key reason why I do really like the huddles, even though I do think sometimes they're awkwardly placed. Or I've seen this a couple times in your playthrough where you'll just accidentally click on it during an inopportune moment.
I did do that a lot, yes.
Yeah. And I think it could have been a little better implemented, even though I think the payoff of the huddle is obviously like you get to play a really cool song while you're, blasting things away, which is really, really neat. Also, like the joke of playing the final countdown in like the big post-credits battle, that's an obviously cheesy moment, but they've earned it by that point.
Yeah,
and so it totally works. By the way, the post-credits thing is very funny because you don't necessarily think it's going to go into that, and then all of a sudden it launches into like this big multi-sequence boss battle at the very end, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, though I did think the final boss was pretty cool, and that the fake out thing too was kind of neat. Shoji, go ahead there, and I'm going to read the rest of our comments from the people who wrote in.
Yeah, just touching on the music, that was definitely a great aspect of the game. I just really also liked that fake Iron Maiden-esque band called Star-Lord,
Yes.
which is how he got his name in the game. And I just really liked that they basically just gave you an entire album that you could listen to in the areas when you were down in the flashbacks in his room. And, you had the entire, discography of the songs and everything, and you could kind of flip through it. And at one point I ended up going back and I just sat there and listened to that entire album, and that fake band was amazing. Like it was just so good. So it just again goes back to the audio and soundtrack in this game were just top notch.
That's 2 games in a row with a good fake band in them. The Asgard somethings in Alan Wake that we had last month were really good, right? Now this one too. Shawn, something you want to add before I get to more of these written in statements?
Yeah, just before we get off the topic, the soundtrack was very good. It's hard to mess up, the Guardian shtick of having just,
Sure.
rock ballads. But I also think that they did just pick good ones. And yeah, the Star-Lord band, I did spend, it is the beginning of the game, I believe, where you can just sit there in Peter's bed listening to the tape. And I did spend like the first 15 minutes of my playthrough just listening to that album and reading the liner notes. That type of world building is very fun, I think. And I did also, I don't think anyone was wondering, but in case you were, no, the tape does not flip over. It's just, they didn't account for that. But yeah, the game was absolutely gorgeous. I didn't like certain things about it. Like there were moments where I was like, oh, like the shadows look weird here. That's awkward compared to like how like the entire first level is so beautiful with like the bright colors and everything, and like the alien just geography of everything is very well done. It's very creative. And just from a technical standpoint, I was only playing at 1080p. I was just playing on my monitor on my computer. It sounds like we all actually like played on a variety of different devices, but that's where I played it. And so since I was playing at 1080p, I could like crank the ray tracing and all the graphical settings and everything. And yeah, it was beautiful, except for slight awkward moments like I mentioned. Bench in his response, I remember he mentioned like there were some like awkward glitches every once in a while and some crashing. I did have a couple crashes and like someone falling through the floor once. Like
What did
Peter
you play
was
on,
stuck
Shawn?
in something. PC. I just played the Game Pass version on PC. But yeah, I had a couple glitches like that, but nothing to take away from it. But yeah, the visuals were
I
fantastic.
don't. I didn't have any like big glitches or crashes. I just had some performance issues on. I played a little bit on Xbox Series S, and it didn't run as well as I thought it would on Series S, and then on PC also was like
That's
I was
something.
dangling with things more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I remember when this game came out, the Digital Foundry review, they were like surprised that there wasn't even a 60 FPS option at first. And then they like analyzed it and it's like, okay, this is actually just like it is a heavier game. It's not necessarily unoptimized, it's just the things that they chose to do are heavy on any given system. And I am glad that I played on PC so I could get that 60 FPS because it did, at the very least, it overall felt good, even if I wasn't meshing with some of the gameplay stuff.
Beefhammer's right. We're all too cowardly to play the Switch Cloud version. All right, Jed, I'm going to let you go real quick. Then I am going to read some of these from the thread.
Yeah, just very quick about the performance. I played it on Xbox. I thought it ran very well there. The Xbox Series X. I do know with the Series S, those frame rate issues, they tend to be less of an issue if you got the VRR option on like either your monitor or your TV. If you have that, it does basically help smooth out a lot of those performance issues. I think that's probably my recommendation to a lot of those Series S games. If you have a VRR television or a monitor, like that should help like prevent, at least maintain a pretty smooth experience going forward. But yeah, other than that, it technically plays well in the Series X, and yeah, it looks visually and audio wise is very good.
So Low Rule here said, played on the Steam Deck, awesome deck game, and I loved it. I'm sure a lot of people will call it the story and gameplay, so I just want to give a shout out to the difficulty options. They had the ability to change every single layer of the gameplay from damage dealt, countdown timers, damage received, etc. They really put a lot of effort in making this game accessible. Kudos to Eidos Montreal. And Casual said, I'm of two minds when it comes to this game. I found story stellar and the character work and interactions even more so. The combat does not come near those levels of shine, however. At best, it feels mindless and at worst repetitive and inconsequential. To end on a positive note, I really enjoyed poking around in Nowhere and especially the Collector's Museum with all the Easter eggs. Man, I did not get to go inside the Collector's Museum because I didn't want to waste all my money and I didn't get my free ticket that I apparently could have got if I went to the bar. That's my biggest regret is that I didn't go into like the bar when I should have, so I missed out on some stuff there. But oh well, that's what YouTube is for. Gerber here says, "Damn, I foolishly assumed the discussion would be Thursday, so haven't gotten my thoughts into a coherent structure. Back to good old bullet points. I need to address Mike's erroneous assertion that I'm British, I'm Irish, and very offended at being called a no good, redacted, son of, also redacted, and redacted for libel. Glad to clear that up. Man, I don't even remember. Well, I apologize for that. He says, the writing is the highlight of the game. I knew it had been praised a lot, but most of it was from people who spell colorful with one U and thus can't be trusted. Well, on this occasion, they were correct. Drax is the team member who gets the most love story wise, and this felt a lot more like comics Drax than Batista's portrayal of him in the movie. If Big Dave is listening, then please, oh, he's listening, he's a big fan of the show, then please note this is a criticism of how the character is written, not performed, so please don't hurt me. Jeff keeps talking shit about you constantly, though. Mike knows where he lives, just saying. Drax succumbing to the promise and the chapter dealing with the Guardians saving him from his mind prison was the moment the game went from good to great for me, as I felt genuinely bad for him having to turn his back on his family the way he did. The soundtrack copying the style they went for in the movies is a bit cheap, but it mostly works. The huddle stuff never stopped being goofy, but I liked that. Licensed tracks played while you were on the Milano adds flavor as well. On PlayStation 5, I found the game to be surprisingly buggy for a modern AAA title. I had to quit out and restart it a number of times when the game wasn't picking up my controller inputs after a cutscene. I also had issues where combat prompts remained on screen after a fight, and some of the shimmy sections just got super stick, for lack of a better term, where Star Lord would turn around and go back the way he came, which made exploring environments a bit awkward. Combat was fine, but nothing exceptional. There were perhaps too many abilities in play, and ultimately, my number one tactic was to just keep running and spam the ally abilities. Yeah, that's a pretty good tactic. This may make me shallow, but I did find the combat less interesting once I hit the point where the numbers stopped going up. After that, combat felt more of a hindrance. Overall, I had a great time, and sadly, almost certainly won't see a follow up. The bonus costumes in Journal are great. I did have a bug I remembered now, by the way, where at one point, for some reason, Groot's dialogue stopped playing, which wasn't too bad because I
Yep,
knew what
me
he
too.
was saying. Yeah, he would just,
Same thing.
yeah, it was a weird bug, but I guess if it had to happen to a character, it should be to Groot because I know what he's saying anyways.
I was confused because everyone kept talking to him and like, what?
Right.
He's not. Leave him alone. He's not saying
He's
anything.
not saying shit. Bonus costumes, I like collecting that stuff, but I also put none of them on because I liked the costumes that everybody had just fine. It was interesting that they even did have the movie costumes. I mean, that stuff always works best in Spider-Man or even Batman, where those characters just have just had so many costumes that it is fun to collect those things. Guardians of the Galaxy, that's a little bit more difficult. How many variations are there really? So, okay, I think we covered a lot of ground here, so I'm going to call for final thoughts from anybody who wants to offer them up. This was a good discussion. I was a little surprised that there was a little bit more negativity than I was expecting, but I think all of those, well, most of those criticisms are valid enough. Somebody mentioned more than the sum of its parts, and I think that makes sense. Because even as I talk about the game, it is hard to explain why it is so likable. I think that's part of the reason why it had a hard time selling. Because it is, even if you write a review about this game, it's hard to say why you like it so much, except the writing's really good, combat's okay, but ooh, the writing is good. Jedi, why don't you go first there?
Sure. Final thoughts is I love this game. I think it is on par with the Guardians films, which are actually I think are among my favorite films in the MCU. In particular, I think Volume 2 is one of the top 3 Marvel movies of all time.
Interesting. Volume 2, okay.
Yes, I love Volume 2. So I was
like
just very
Pac-Man.
happy.
You just like Pac-Man.
That very well may be true. Also, sad dads, and but neither here nor there. Yeah, I was just very happy that we at least got a good product that is on par with those films that I really, really like, and I think that's what a lot of people just wanted as well. I think once people actually got their hands on the game, they were surprised. I think that it pretty much matched that quality, and in terms of like the sequel, I would love if they would make another one, but I think the way the story ends by Nikki's story getting resolved, right? Like her story is that she lost her family and now she's finally found a new one. Like that is the basic story that she goes through. Of course, the Guardians grow as well, but if they were just left there, I think that's still a pretty satisfying story, even if they did obviously tease some things that they may have done in a sequel.
Octo, how about you?
Solid 8 out of 10. I think what you describe as negativity, I would describe as a bit of bitterness, because what's good about it just makes the parts that aren't good just stand out so much more. It's like, hey, if the gameplay was better, then man, this game would have been a 10 out of 10. So it just feels like you have to suffer through that stuff to get to the good stuff. And I think that's why it feels like, I'm playing the game, but oh, I'm going to get to the good story stuff later. I think I would end on a question, more along the lines of what would you like IDOS Montreal to do next? Because personally, even though I enjoyed this one, the thought of a Deus Ex game with this level of character development is very tantalizing to me personally. So I was curious if anyone had any preferences when choosing between what would you like IDOS Montreal to do next. And thanks.
Randy, how about you give us your final thoughts and maybe answer Octo's question there? What would you like Eidos Montreal to do next?
I like the idea of a Deus Ex game, but the narrative director left Eidos Montreal and is now working on the next Mass Effect game. So I'm actually a lot more interested in the next Mass Effect game. Yeah. In terms of my final thoughts on this game, I think you guys kind of have an idea of what I think. I hated every second. No, I'm kidding. I love this game, and I genuinely thought we were going to spend the first 5 minutes brushing aside the stuff that we didn't like, and then spend the next portion of the hour just gushing over the story and how well crafted it is. I truly cannot think of a story that is better crafted than this one. We didn't even get into the subject matter and how it handled it really well and how it paid everything off, and it really I had a good time talking to you guys about this. I very much value everything you had to say. A lot of it is fair. I am disappointed that we did not get into the meat of the
what do you
story
think
that I
that
wanted
mean?
to.
Are you just talking about the whole kind of, found family sort of thing?
Well, the found family, like dealing with loss. I mean, it was a very personal. It resonated with me because it hit a lot of stuff that I've had to deal with, and like I said, that Nikki thing really, really hit home for me because I've had to talk with people like Nikki. I've been like Nikki, and the way you resolve that is the way that you're supposed to resolve that, and it was handled so well, and it could have been just handled improperly, and it just wasn't. And I just thought it was really, really strong, super emotional, and it's a goofball game, and it deals with heavy stuff like that, and I think it works really well. I kind of wanted to go into that personally, and just, I mean, if I'm being honest, we could just go line by line and talk about how amazing it is, but obviously we don't have time for that. But yeah, I love this game. Gameplay, it doesn't matter. I love it.
Villain Mac, how about you?
I love this game. It came out last year, and I was really kind of in between games. Really, I didn't know what to play. I had just come off a long-term relationship, and so it was just really tough to get invested. And so I started playing this game, and I was really into it. And it really took my mind off of things. And then it put my mind onto things because the game talks about grief, letting go of the past, and living in the now, and knowing what you have in front of you is more important than the denial of the past and all. So that all like hit really hard and really elevated this game for me. Yeah.
All right, let's get to the negatives. Shawn, what's your last word here?
Yes, as the captain of the negative Nellies in this discussion.
The captain.
Okay, so not that we're like scoring these or grading these or reviewing them necessarily, but we're just giving thoughts here. Like, just as a point of reference, I would say is I would give this game personally like a 6 out of 10. I think it's an okay game, and ironically, Mike, I was the one who said more of some of its parts because I think a lot of its parts are subpar. But the shining moments in it, the good things that they did are so good that really drags it up. For me, it's like a law of averages thing where I do think that some of the writing is legitimately bad, and I gotta stop saying it. I think some of the dialogue is legitimately bad, and it was enough to drag it down for me in a story-based game. But the stuff that was really good was fantastic. It was like really high up there, and so I thought it really is something that comes together in the middle, and I think it's very much a good example of it's not for me, and which is perfectly fine because I don't think it's a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. I think that they did a lot of very interesting things, a lot of very good things, and I think that this would have been a very good first game in a series. It is it very much feels like an Uncharted 1 to me, where it's like, okay, I can see what you're going for. You did some good stuff there. You just really need to refine that in the next one, which, as we all know, probably won't happen, which is very unfortunate, because I think the next one they could just massaged over everything that people didn't like, whether it's me thinking some of the dialogue is cheesy, or I think all of us basically thinking the combat was like mediocre at best, really. But and then just to touch on something that Randy was sort of getting into there, I do want to say that I do appreciate, we're was episode 6 of Game Club. I do appreciate that even if some of us, such as myself, are more negative on a topic, that we can just have a respectful discussion about this and just share our opinions. And it's not just, hey, you disagree with me, you suck, your opinion sucks, that's bad. I'm glad that we can have a nice like level-headed conversation about what we like or didn't like about it. Unless you're mere beef hammer, and in which case apparently Mike will just say we're wrong because we're moderators.
I do like always be closing my chat screaming, "You're an okay game, Shawn." That's good. Oh, Villain Mac though just reposted the line of the game from Drax in my chat. I will cherish the time that we had and not resent the time that we lost. The opposite of how I feel about my time spent with Turbo, Shawn. Fantastic.
Fair enough.
All right, B. Yeah. You get the last word amongst anybody who's not named Mike Minotti.
That's good. Yeah. First off, you call us negative. I think me and Shawn both said we'd give it like a 6, so it's not like we hate this.
The internet
game.
told me that's an awful score.
That was Jeff. Needs to back me up.
Jeff would be mad at you guys. Jeff loves this game.
That's a fair point. Well, yeah. Well, that's the other thing. Is like this game kind of has an uphill battle for me because I don't really like this genre. I'm the kind of guy who does actually like, a lot of Sony's big budget games. I like the weirder stuff. So it's already like having to climb a hill for me. Yeah, I don't actually have too much more to say about it because, like you said, it's kind of hard to describe what you guys like about it. And for me, I'm like, just a bit disappointed in. I don't know if there's much else.
That's fair.
I think there's one thing, like if you do like a game with weird characters in a weird place, you should play Earthbound, which you said you would play at the end of the year, but you didn't. Yeah. So
I lied.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, there's other things. Turns out I did not have time to just randomly play some 30-hour RPG for funsies. So yeah, I was wrong there. I was way off. I thought if absolutely no time this month either. Gosh. Yeah, maybe next year, Play Chain. Well, I know better than to make promises, that's for sure. Well, all right then, everybody. I think that just about does it. I think there weren't any wrong opinions here. I think that the writing just really worked for me on all levels. It never felt cringy to me, which is so easy to do with this kind of sort of funny, quippy kind of game that needs to balance tones and kind of get serious and be a bit more heartfelt at times, but in that kind of still mainstream comic booky kind of way, right? I think it handled that tone incredibly well, and that's ultimately what really impressed me about this one. It was just a good time. It was always engaging, even at 20 hours, which was, that's something we didn't even talk about. Is that too long for a game like this? Maybe, and yet it still was very easy to kind of play and keep up with. So I want to thank everybody who joined me for this chat today. I think it was a really fun time. Our next game is Strider 2014. Very different kind of a game. I got to actually pick all of the nominees this month since it's my birthday month, and I'm a very special boy. And they were all kind of shorter games because, again, there's a lot of other games to play this month. And then next month, we're going to be picking from all of the losers of the last 3 months. So it's the kind of the redemption last try for some of those games. So it'll be fun to see what wins in January also. But for now, get playing Strider 2014 if you want to join us in the Game Club discussion for that one. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We will be back, but in the meantime, we got games to play.